Hello and welcome everyone to the InetSoft 2022 new release webinar. It's been a while since our last product release webinar, so we're very excited to show all of you our latest product updates. My name is Ben Williams. I work in marketing here at InetSoft, and with me here is Katie Rousset, who is a systems engineer at InetSoft. Now, this webinar will mostly focus on what's new in the 2022 release, but it's also going to feature some important updates from the 2021 and the 2020.1 releases. Now, I'm going to briefly summarize these updates, and then Katie is going to demonstrate them and describe them in greater detail. There's also going to be a question and answer period at the end. So if you have any questions, you can enter them into the Zoom webinar at any time. We will answer as many of your questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, we will answer you privately via email. Let's get started. Okay, we have a number of new chart types from both the 2021 and the 2022 releases. Katie's going to discuss many of these in greater detail, but I'll just briefly list them here. We have jump line, hierarchy tree, funnel, step line, interval chart, network and circular network, and Gantt charts. Now, Gantt charts were an option in previous versions, but they required a script. So now they're just another option in the chart menu. Now, in addition to these new chart types, we've expanded the capabilities of our map charts. Now, our map charts can now run on Google Maps or Mapbox instead of just simple shape files. Now, this enables interactive zoom and other features, and also maps can now have contour styling, enabling density to be visualized, as it is on the map on the left-hand side that you can see here. Next is our update to web-based data models from version 20.1. We have a new user interface for both the physical views and logical models. Both of these can now be managed in the web portal for those with the appropriate permissions. Now, this previously required one to have Style Studio on their desktop, can now be done entirely in the web. So this builds upon the web-based data models that were enabled by previous product releases. Next is an update to our date comparison features that facilitate the flexible comparison of different date groupings. So a lot of custom date comparisons, which previously required going into the data worksheet, can now be done entirely within the dashboard. Now for an update to our Enterprise Manager task scheduler. You can now schedule tasks by groups of users instead of having to add individual users each time. And a couple more updates. While designing in Visual Composer, we now have a console that will capture high-level warnings and errors as they happen during design. This allows designers to see the errors that occur without having to go into Enterprise Manager. We've also revised our back-end storage structure with a new DSL interface for extracting and updating files. And this improves stability in scalable environments. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to switch over to Katie so she can discuss these updates in greater detail, demonstrate some of the new features. Once again, if you have any questions, just enter those into the appropriate question and answer panel at any time.
Start off this live webinar, we're going to touch on the version 2020.1 enhancement that we haven't done a webinar on, which is building data models in the web portal instead of having to do them in Style Studio. Now, you will still be able to create, manage, and maintain data models within Style Studio, But now if you choose to give security permissions to specific users, they can edit, manage, maintain, or create from scratch data models, as well as the virtual private models that can sit on top of them for data security. So within the user portal, given appropriate permissions, I can create a physical view. Now, it will be a slight difference in terms of user experience compared to building a data model in Style Studio. It's not exactly drag and drop. Instead, you're actually checking off the particular tables and views that you want to make sure that you include. We did a little bit more of a compact style for modeling the joins, where you can always expand to see the particular fields that are in that table or view, but it's not fully expanded all the time. To define an appropriate join between two tables, you're able to select the join handler, drag, and drop. It will bring forward a join dialog so that way you can ensure that you're doing the appropriate join. Whether it's that it should be on different columns, whether it should be that there's more than one, you can define that through drag and drop. You can select the existing join, you can remove it, or potentially adjust it. Maybe it's that you need it to be an outer join. We will give some visual representation if you're adjusting the join type between two tables or views. And then from there, you can go back into the modeling portion of the physical creation. So I can continue to use drag and drop to map the appropriate join relationships, just like within Style Studio. If you need to create a special SQL inline view, you can do so. We also do have horizontal auto layout or vertical auto layout that you can leverage instead of self-positioning the various tables and views that you're including in your physical view. So there's still drag and drop, point and click, but just a few differences in steps. We've also added a really nice ability for when you select a particular table, you can see the join relationship of what is going out from that particular table. So this way you can always double check that it's on the appropriate column. Once you have a data model created, you can go ahead and add a logical model to that physical view. So that's the second stage within your data model. You can select whichever physical view that you have explicitly saved that you want to use. Once you've done that step, instead of right-click menus, we just have simple select to add element. I can start with my entities. So I'm going to be able to create my different organizational entities that I want to select various fields to be exposed as attributes within. So it's all just going through a checklist in a simple step-by-step, almost wizard-like design. Now I can always come back in and expose additional attributes. I can add expression fields. I can add additional entities. I can select attributes that I've exposed and take a minute to alias them, or potentially update the mapping as to which physical column it should go back to. I can set up default formatting and the auto drill, all like you could within the logical model creation of Style Studio. So you can, again, create from scratch, or you can edit, modify, and maintain existing data models that had previously been created for your relational data sources. Now, we do continue to add general enhancements to the various different web data source API data sources that we are supporting, and you can query those within the worksheet. But having the flexibility to build out the extensive data models with the databases that you're connecting to will give you a lot more flexibility than when you always had to go back to Style Studio to jump into some of the different charts and some of those enhancements that have happened for version 2022. The support for the new connections through either Mapbox or Google Maps for use as the background when looking to do map-based data presentation It is something that I didn't hook up personally within my explicit design environment, so I'm going to be showcasing, actually it's up on the website for you to be able to look at on Gallery. So if you go to our Atlantic hurricane season, you can see the Mapbox interface and what it looks like when you have a license key deployed. So all you have to do is have a Mapbox or a Google Maps API key and follow some steps to deploy that within Enterprise Manager, and you can select that instead of the traditional shapefile map style. Now, with this enhancement, we've also added an additional chart type that is not just to plot map, but to plot map with contour. So contour, you can always do, of course, a scatter contour as well, which would be more of a measure to measure, just showing a general density when doing a scatter plot. But with the contour map, you can get that other perspective that you can, of course, still style to maybe actually do a different type of analytic than plotting locations, plotting paths, or maybe sizing by a certain amount or quantity. By getting these density maps, you can still zoom in and interact with your chart in various ways. All of the different interactivity is going to be in place. And you'll notice that I did this as a basic end user, which means that it's something that even interacting with it as an end user in that ad hoc way that you can for dashboards, you would be able to have this type of experience when you're using the scatter contour, again, either on the classic shapefile charts or to actually have the zoom interaction over a Mapbox or Google Maps. Some of the other chart types that were mentioned, some of them were a version 2021 enhancement versus a 2022 enhancement in terms of some of the new chart types. So this particular example has a jump line example where it's just a slight variation on plotting different points, different values and quantities. The line gives you a little bit more of a clear-cut perspective on seeing that exact value. This HR example has a lightweight tree hierarchy displayed. We do also support network and circular network stylings where you're connecting the different points and spiderwebbing out from them, but we're just going to be showing a little bit more of that hierarchy style tree one for the different examples that we're going to cover today. Now, this HR example also happens to cover the step area. So jump line, you can imagine that if you're then connecting the different lines that you're jumping to, it becomes that step line style. Well, we have a step area option. So you can do that nice fill below, getting this stacked area perspective. And if your values are representing, say, particular averages for the entire day, it's kind of representing that that entire period of time has had that value. Our take on the funnel chart does not do more of that pointed style. Instead, you're just seeing the proportional quantities as solid bars, but in a more center of alignment styled perspective with our funnel. So it is a little bit of a slightly different take, more modern style on the classic funnel chart to be just another way that you can elect to visualize your different values. This power example is showcasing what the step line looks like when you're not doing the area fill below, just to give a brief look at some of these different styles. As I said, some of them were introduced in 2021, and they go hand in hand with the scatter contour and contour that were introduced in version 22. Now, Gantt charts in the past, you could actually take on the task of creating chart scripting to have a Gantt chart style script, but now it is going to be just simple chart binding to be able to do this, project management, project timeline type visuals. Obviously, you can also use it as more of like a scheduling style, but typically you want to have that start time and time instead of just points in time when you're doing this type of data representation. So project management would be the broadest application for leveraging these. Now, this manufacturing example actually has a couple of different perspectives for us. Just a lightweight look at how the interval style will have you have a low and a high and do that nice fill between with the values. But also it gives us a first look at the new date range comparison feature. New date range comparison feature takes our previously supported change from previous period calculation and also the comparison mode that you could enable with the calendar and brings a new user interface to provide more flexibility for standard comparisons and visuals and even a more dynamic option with custom periods that would have been hard to capture with some of the standard ways that had been used in the past for creating these. The range comparisons, when they're designed into the dashboard, such as change from previous month to month, year to date, or quarter to quarter, year to date, the user can then actually make their own adjustments to the date comparison. As you can see, you would be able to set overall volume of periods, or if you wanted to have it share amongst different components. You're given options for, do you want to see the change value or the percent change? The user would be able to make adjustments and customizations and capture it in their bookmark with either the chart stylings that you want to do. And that date range comparison can be applied to both charts as well as crosstab tables. So this way you can get the types of comparisons that you want to have visually, whether it's the flat details in the table or having more of that graphical perspective. The end user experience with creating the date range comparison will match what the designers and the developers are going to have when initially setting up a date range comparison. All you need to get started with creating a date range comparison is a chart or a crosstab with a date field and some form of measure, some metric, some calculation that you're working on. And then you're able to do a right-click date range comparison. You can choose maybe some very specific custom periods that you want to compare. Maybe it's that you want to have a certain volume of years and that you want to break it down by week and that you want to show just the percent change. Depending on the combinations that you have selected, maybe a FASTA chart style and so on, because you might have other dimensions that you've factored into your chart, will just trigger default styling that should mirror what is going to be the most common, most popular, and optimal way to visualize this type of comparison. Now, when you have date in the past, currently right now, this particular dashboard has historical data, 2012, 2013, 2014 type data. So if I were to do only the last 2 years, I'm actually going to trigger a warning that there's no data for the range that I've actually selected. So this is something where you're going to get that visual feedback of, hey, it's an empty chart. You can jump back into your range comparison, maybe up, the periods that you want to have available. And once you do that, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, no, I can do the change differential for 2012 and 2013. And because I'm doing it by week, I'm going to get various different percentages on the different styles that I've selected. Now, I had noticed my pop-up, but if I hadn't, our new console interface is going to capture your various error, warning, and info general messages that are feedback given to you when you're designing, whether it's a dashboard or a data worksheet. You can now revisit and see it again. You can get that clarity of, oh, it was complaining about this column, or oh, it was complaining about the fact that I was trying to use 2 measures and a dimension with a particular chart type and that's not compatible. What was it that it was warning me or giving me information on? I'm able to see that right away instead of having to take a step out and go back to Enterprise Manager to get those additional details. Now, on a whole, when you're looking to potentially upgrade to version 2022 and you're looking to take that on, we actually now have a way to pre-convert your assets using a nice DSL upgraded storage command. But with the new storage, you're going to want to keep in mind that in the past where you might have visually checked your sre.properties or your repository.xml and so on, all those files will now be in this specialty storage structure. You would not be able to do just simple manual file inspection. As mentioned, there is going to be command line options for extracting or putting back files as required, but we are confident that all of the different properties and configurations that you need to be able to adjust, modify, or extract can all be done through the asset management within Enterprise Manager. So you'll be able to just use that user interface going forward. And with this new backend storage structure, it might be a little bit different than what you're used to, but we're confident that it's going to help with stability and scalability of environments. And if you do find that you want to take on upgrading to version 2022, I would encourage you to reach out to your account manager, your technical point of contact, so that way you can have an engineer work with you to begin the process of going through testing version 2022 assets and getting your environment upgraded. Now, there are little minor features and so on that will be on the feature list that will be linked to with the follow-up that you'll get from this demo, but we're going to go ahead and pass things back over to Ben in terms of questions that we'll address. And as mentioned before, if we don't necessarily get to everyone's questions, we will certainly follow up after the
Thank you, Katie. We do have a number of questions here, just in the order that they were asked. What functions are Style Studio still needed for?
So with Style Studio, if you are a customer that is utilizing our paginated reporting presentation layer, because there are some that are just dashboard only customers. With the reporting, yes, the core of the paginated reporting still is created, managed, and maintained within Style Studio. Yes, we have the ad hoc reports that are created within the portal, but reports themselves fundamentally are still a Style Studio asset in terms of creation and management of those assets. So, of course, the elements that go with the report would also be created in Style Studio. So those would be components such as themes and parameter sheets and meta templates. Then you also have the table styles and reusable JavaScript functions that you've created that are custom for yourself. Those two that would be used for either dashboards or reports, you would still create, manage, and maintain those within Style Studio. You, of course, can work on your worksheets, your data source connections, and your data models now in the web, as well as within Style Studio, and the same goes for the virtual private models. However, the historical queries created within Style Studio that are listed under your data source, you would still create, manage, and maintain those within Style Studio as well to go hand in hand with the reports, table styles, and JavaScript functions.
Okay. The next question is, do the individual error logs capture all of the errors? If not, what errors do they leave out?
So the messages are more of the general high-level message, whether it's a warning, an error, or an info-based message that would normally be popped up for the user to see just from the interface itself. It is giving you a way to be able to revisit and look at specific ones that are from your active designing session. It is not going to be full stack traces. It is not going to be full logging, such as the queries you executed and things like that, that would potentially be captured in Enterprise Manager normally in those logs, depending on what log level you're set at. So instead, it is going to be just any of those general error, warning, or info level messages that would be those little pop-ups that you get at design time for either dashboards or worksheets.
We have time for at least one more question here. Do any of the new chart types require a script?
No, so the new step line, jump line, or even just integrating with the map box. In the past, we had options for Google Maps to be a coordinate background for your chart, but you had to use our chart scripting in the past. The same thing for the Gantt chart. If you wanted to achieve that look, you had to do the chart scripting. All of these charts are now complete, just chart binding based. So you're able to explicitly set the chart type and use it. Now you can do scripting with these chart types as with all of our different chart types. And again, as mentioned, for like the map box or the Google Maps options, those you need to have the API key deployed in Enterprise Manager to leverage them. But aside from that, you won't have to do any chart scripting to achieve any of the visual effects of these.
Well, a few more questions to answer, but we're gonna, for those who are still waiting on an answer, we're going to reach out to you via email to address those. Now, we will also be sending out an email to everyone who attended with a link to our extensive feature list, upgrade instructions, and the new 2022 developer documentation. So thank you, Katie, and thank you, everyone, for attending the 2022 Style Intelligence New Release webinar. We hope you enjoy the new product features. Have a great day.